are these people?
But you've heard that that Hamas uses human shields, right? They're using hostages and all that fun stuff. So Robert Inlakesh, you had him earlier tonight. I'm bringing him again, and he's going to tell you where there's evidence. So we'll let him speak.
Hamas uses Palestinians as human shields. This is something that we hear constantly repeated in Western corporate media. This is despite the fact that all of the Human Rights Watch reports and Amnesty International reports that were produced on what has happened in the past in Gaza have never found this to be true. But lo and behold, there is factual evidence which supports Israel's claim about Hamas using human shields. So first of all, we have to go to the evidence and what the evidence tells us. But in order to do that, we need a definition of what human shielding actually is. So what does the International Red Cross say about human shielding? It says that human shielding, the term human shield, as used in international humanitarian law, means a civilian placed in front of a military objective so that his civilian status will deter the enemy from attacking this objective. So, fact number one, up until 2005, under the neighbor procedure, the use of Palestinian civilians as human shields was a common practice in the Israeli military, legal under Israeli law, but never mind that. They definitely outlawed it. They outlawed it in 2005. So fact number two, when Israel eventually outlawed the practice, the Israeli army protested. In fact, the then Israel Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz appeared in court to present arguments to repeal the ban. Okay, never mind. Let's go to the top Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, the information center in the occupied territories. They're Israeli. They're going to tell us exactly what has been happening with Hamas using human shields. And this is what they have to say about the usage of human shields. They say, quote, since the beginning of the occupation in 1967, Israeli security forces have reportedly used Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as human shields, ordering them to perform military tasks that risk their lives. As part of this policy, soldiers have ordered Palestinian civilians to remove suspicious objects from roads, to tell people to come out of their homes so that the military can arrest them, to stand in front of soldiers while the latter shoot from behind them, and more. The Palestinian civilians were chosen at random for these tasks and could not refuse the demand placed on them by armed soldiers. Okay, so that clearly was something in the past. It talks about 1967. We're going to go to what Hamas has been doing now. This must be a mix-up. So breaking the silence, this is an Israeli soldier group. This is what they have to say about Hamas human shields. They say that IDF soldiers confessed to using Palestinians as human shields since it was outlawed. But okay, that's just reports from in the past. That surely has not happened recently. And recently what we've seen is Hamas using human shields. So we're going to get onto those cases. So case number one, on May 13, 2022, a 16-year-old Palestinian girl named Ahed was left traumatized after being used by Israeli soldiers as a human shield. A week later, Israeli forces were accused of the same tactics after a photograph appeared to show them using a Palestinian man as a human shield. Okay, let's do away with that because we're talking about what happened after October 7th. So here is the one documented case where a human shield was used, and it was in the city of Al Khalil in the West Bank. Following October 7th, the Hamas-led attack, Israeli forces were filmed using a Palestinian man as a literal human shield. Okay. When Israeli soldiers take Palestinians as human shields, as have been documented, Israel's a democracy. It has a robust legal system. And we know that taking human shields has been outlawed since 2005. So Israeli soldiers are punished for doing things like taking human shields of Palestinian civilians. And here's the case I'm going to read to you. The last time they were punished was doing this during the 2008-9 war against Gaza, and B'Tselem said that the two soldiers in question had ordered a 9-year-old boy at gunpoint to open a bag they suspected was booby-trapped. Despite the gravity of their conduct, putting a young child at risk, the two were given a 3-month conditional sentence and demoted from staff sergeant to private some 2 years after the incident took place. None of their commanding officers were tried. And the last note I have down here, the last piece of evidence, is that Israel has been documented as using thousands of Palestinians as human shields. Well, I guess the information that we have at hand indicates that Israel uses Palestinians as human shields, not Hamas. That's a bummer.
Well,
I place his accent. Like he's definitely
Hamas
like
uses-
north.
go ahead.
He's definitely like north. I'm trying to figure out where north.
So
Maybe north, maybe York, I guess.
I wanted to read the article he has with this because it goes a little more in depth. So Hamas uses Palestinians as human shields. You've heard the claim echoed ad nauseum in Western corporate media, yet numerous reports from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and other human rights groups have found the allegations, which are brought to bear by Israeli officials nearly every time Gaza hits the news, to not only be untrue. They've discovered that Israel itself has consistently engaged in wanton use, and I think that's wanton use of Palestinian civilians, including children, as human shields. I think there's a typo there, Mr. Inlakesh. You might want to fix that. But in 2014, he obviously had wontons on the brain, and I get it. They're delicious, tasty treats. In 2014, Amnesty International set of allegations that Hamas was using human shields, right? So Amnesty International is monitoring and investigating such reports, but does not have evidence at this point that Palestinian civilians have been intentionally used by Hamas or Palestinian armed groups during the current hostilities to shield. My stoner sign fell down. That was what that noise was.
Okay.
I was like, Jesus Christ.
Oh,
they're coming. They're after me. But does not have evidence at this point that Palestinian civilians have been intentionally used by Hamas or Palestinian armed groups during the current hostilities to shield specific locations or military personnel or equipment from Israeli attacks. In previous conflicts, Amnesty International has documented that Palestinian armed groups have stored munitions in and fired indiscriminate rockets from residential areas in the Gaza Strip in violation of international humanitarian law. Reports have also emerged during the current conflict of Hamas urging residents to ignore Israeli warnings to evacuate. However, these calls may have been motivated by a desire to minimize panic and displacement. In any case, such statements are not the same as directing specific civilians to remain in their homes as human shields for fighters, munitions, or military equipment under international humanitarian law. Even if human shields are being used, Israel's obligations to protest these civilians would still apply. So I'm going to get to this in a second article here in a bit about this, not leaving when told to leave, and why those safe zones might not be great for that. We'll get to that. But the International Red Cross defines human shielding, the term used in international humanitarian law, to describe the practice as the art of placing a civilian in front of a military objective to deter attacks due to their civilian status, right? So, despite their accusation against Hamas, the Israeli Defense Forces themselves regularly used Palestinian civilians as human shields under an Israeli military doctrine called the neighbor procedure. Until it was outlawed by the Knesset in 2005, this left Israeli military officials incensed. Former Israeli Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz even appeared in court in order to argue for the ban's repeal. So, B'Tselem, a prominent Israeli human rights organization operating in the occupied territories, reports that since Israel's 1967 occupation, Israeli security forces have reportedly exploited Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip as human shields. The right groups found that since the beginning of occupation in 1967, Israeli security forces have repeatedly used Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip as human shields, ordering them to perform military tasks that risk their lives. As part of this policy, soldiers have ordered Palestinian civilians to remove suspicious objects from roads, tell people to come out of their homes, right? We heard this from Mr. Inlakesh a minute ago. Palestinian civilians were chosen at random for these tasks and could not refuse the demand placed on them by armed soldiers, right? So Israel is often touted as the only democracy in the Middle East. Its robust legal system is praised as a panacea to the dictatorial regimes and monarchies of neighboring Arab states. One could infer, therefore, that since it was outlawed by the Israeli Knesset in 2005, the Israeli Defense Forces have halted the barbaric practice, and any soldiers caught restoring it, too, would be swiftly brought to justice per Israel's own legislation. Yet, breaking the silence, a group of former Israeli soldiers and conscientious objectors who speak out about human rights abuses by the Israeli military say the practice continued unabated. Well after it was outlawed in 2005, dozens of highly publicized cases, both inside and outside of Israel, corroborate their claims. On May 13th, 2022, 6-year-old Ahed was left traumatized after being used as a human shield by Israeli soldiers. Defense for Children International reported that Israeli soldiers forced Ahad Mohammed Rida Mereb, 16 years old, to stand in front of an Israeli military vehicle on May 13th around 8 a.m. in the Al-Hadaf neighborhood of Jenin as Palestinian gunmen shot heavily towards the Israeli forces' position. Israeli forces ordered Ahed to stand outside the military vehicle for around 2 hours while they sat inside. So we have a bit of video from this.
أنا عهد مرعب من جنين عمري 16 سنة.
So she's 16 years old.
طبعا كنا سامعين إنه الباب
She heard the doors and windows exploding. Right? Let me just full screen this. The Israeli soldiers didn't enter the house. They started shouting from outside. Do what? Okay.
No, you good.
Mahmoud, give up. Get out. They kicked us out of the house. They asked my father to come to them. And we were asked to raise our hands against the wall. They took my father away from us. The bullets started getting louder, and my brothers panicked. Israeli forces used me as a human shield in front of their vehicle, shooting from all sides towards the military jeep. The Palestinian resistance were shooting and didn't know yet that I was standing in front of it. The Israeli soldiers hid in their vehicle while I was barely protecting myself. When I was trying to protect myself by covering my head, an Israeli soldier forced me to stand up. It was like he was trying to kill me, not protect me. If he tried to hide, he forced me to stand. I tried to talk to them, but they just silenced me. I just stayed there. Well, he was determined to keep me exposed to danger. And this is, of course, human shielding is prohibited under an international law, right?
Yep.
So they were shooting from all sides and I didn't know what to do. They were shooting. I can't even protect me or my family. As for my brother, I didn't know if he was still alive or if he had been killed, or even my other brothers. I could feel death approaching me. I thought this is the end, and I started to pray. I went behind a tree. I sat down because I couldn't stand anymore. I didn't even try to protect myself or do anything. What is meant to be will be. So there's nothing I could do. I did not know my destiny or what was going to happen to me, my family, or even our house. I spent about 2 hours in an indescribable state of fear, panic, and crying. I could hardly breathe. I stood for 2 hours as a human shield. The sounds were terrifying, very strong as it was shaking the ground. I even kept lowering my head. Due to the intensity of the shootings, the fire was rising from all sides. The sounds were very intense. Even the Israeli forces started shouting more brutally. The more angry they got, the more they would shoot. The house was burning more, and the sounds were very terrifying. There is no word to describe it. When I heard these sounds, since I am a school student, they always teach us that we are still innocent children and we don't have to face risks. But we did not feel this. As we are the children of Palestine from Jenin refugee camp, you realize the practices of the Israeli military occupation, including arrests and demolitions, made us mature, and we no longer feel like children. When Israeli forces withdrew, I only wanted to know what happened to my brother, if he was alive or murdered. When I realized that all of my family was fine, my mental state worsened and started shivering more and more and just crying. Since 2000, DCI Palestine has documented at least 26 cases of Palestinian children used as human shields by Israeli forces, 25 of which occurred after the 2005 decision by the Israeli High Court of Justice prohibiting the practice. So, yeah. Thoughts so far, Kid Bear?
It's
rough.
yeah. It's just hard to see, or to imagine rather, how there could be people online that, I don't know, but would call this young woman a liar.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can imagine, like, what people would say, oh, you know, she's an actress, or oh, whatever else. And, like, you know, but the reality is the proof is in the pudding that Israel has had a history of doing this prior to October 7th. And it's just like, not just people online, but just people in general who are just hardcore Zionists in their attitude and in their mental state. It would not compute that this is like their own is actively doing such atrocities and are not being accounted for that.
Well, we're gonna get to that not accounting very quickly. So just 1 week later, Israeli forces were photographed forcing a Palestinian man into acting as a human shield during a raid in the occupied West Bank after Palestinian resistance fighters began firing on invading Israeli troops. Despite its ban under Israeli law, justice has eluded Palestinian victims of the practice. In fact, the last time an Israeli soldier was punished for using a Palestinian as a human shield was in 2010 for an act committed during the 2008 invasion of Gaza. So, B'Tselem summed up the charges against the two offending soldiers as followed. The two soldiers in question had ordered a 9-year-old boy at gunpoint to open a bag they suspected was booby-trapped. Despite the gravity of their conduct putting a young child at risk, the two were given a 3-month conditional sentence and demoted from staff sergeant to private. Some 2 years after the incident took place, none of their commanding officers were tried. There is little evidence to suggest that Israeli had plans to ditch the practice either. There has been multiple cases documenting Israeli troops using human shields since the events of October 7th, 2023, A video posted to Twitter by renowned Palestinian human rights activist Iso Amro on November 10th shows an Israeli soldier ducking behind a bound and blindfolded Palestinian man during an IDF raid in the Al-Fawar refugee camp in Hebron. Here it is right here, Care Bear. I mean, this is the most blatant case of human shielding, in my opinion. I mean, you couldn't get any more human shield than that right there. So
This is okay to see, right? Okay.
Yeah, I made sure. Like, you know, so yeah, I mean, the article mentioned earlier that, you know, the reason why they're claiming Hamas is using human shields is because they're telling people not to evacuate when evacuation is called by the IDF, right? So that's one of the things. So I wanted to get into that. So this is from Juan Cole, right? So, and I think I got this out of Scheerpost, pretty sure. So this is a war on children, and safe zones are death traps, says UNICEF, right? So this is out of informed comment as well. So Gaza was a free fire zone on Saturday and Sunday, with UN officials saying that no place in the strip is safe. Okay? Hundreds were killed, almost all of them innocent non-combatants, including a worrisome number of children. So, although Israel tried to pull the stunt of issuing a map with supposedly safe zones, almost no one in Gaza has access to that map because of electricity outages and lack of internet access. Yep. So, moreover, many Palestinians don't have transport, and there is nothing to eat or drink at those places anyway. We're going to get to that. Many are refusing to move again, since so many are already internally displaced persons crowded into inadequate United Nations works and relief shelters, which lack sufficient food, water, and other necessities for these hundreds of thousands of people made homeless. Okay, so CNN morning anchor Isabel Rosales interviewed James Elder of UNICEF from Khan Yunis, Gaza. In the supposedly safer South, Elder is an Australian national who lives in Sydney. His bio tag at LinkedIn says James Elder is spokesperson for the United Nations Children Fund. In this role, he is responsible for speaking on humanitarian crises across the globe, together with all key issues that affect children in 2022. This role has meant 5 missions to Ukraine and 3 to the Horn of Africa. So this guy risking some shit, right? So with more thousands of the rebels, 6,000 of whom are already known to have been blasted to smithereens. So that's what we know so far. I'm sure there are thousands more. Gaza journalists are essentially putting out goodbye videos, saying they can no longer gather news and that they may not survive the carpet bombing. I've seen quite a few of those today, even. Unfortunately. So we're going to get to this with this UNICEF guy. So he's going to talk. Here we go. And action.
And speaking about that, James, you recorded a video and posted it on social media. It's gotten some traction describing what you're seeing in Gaza, in particular with the children. Let's watch that real quick.
More children with the wounds of war, with the burns, with the shrapnel littering their body, with the broken bones. Inaction by those with influence is allowing the killing of children. This is a war on children.
Limited food, water, medicine. This is what you're describing, just chaos. How do you live like that? What is the mood from these people you're speaking with?
Utter panic. I've just been in a hospital with bombardments going on all around. I must say, as I was there, 10 children came in with the wounds of war, 10 maybe in a couple of hours. with horrendous wounds, with shrapnel to the brain, with eye injuries, with third-degree burns. It is a war zone, that hospital. So there is panic among the people, absolutely. It changes every hour here. People don't know where to go. They are almost in a trance. Children in the hospital, Isabel, are grabbing me. Mothers are grabbing me saying, take me somewhere safe. A little girl held me, and I tried to take a moment always. She just had 2 empty water bottles. She's in a hospital. Please, can you put some water in them? The water in the taps, it's salty, she can't drink it. So it's utter panic. People are being told to move from A to B. It's like a chess game, except that it ends in the death of children. It's not a game for them. The safe zones, I think, Isabel, is so important. It's a false narrative, and it's a dangerous narrative. People don't have the transport. They don't know where they're meant to go. They're places in the desert. They have no water. They have no food. They have no protection in these places. And so when they get there, disease stalks. And when they quite often get to these places, they are bombed. It's a very dangerous narrative that's being shared. They are not safe zones. They will be zones of death.
Right. And let me give a little bit more context on that. You're speaking about those.
I mean, do you need more context on that? What did he just tell you, lady? Like death.
This is CNN, right?
Yes, it's CNN this morning. Yeah.
I mean,
this is making it to them.
Those flyers that the IDF dropped with those numbered zones telling people to go to safe areas. But based on what you're saying, it sounds like there is no safe area for them to go. And also, they were QR codes in Gaza where internet connection is spotty, so even getting that map is questionable.
Oh, spot on, Isabel. There is no internet access. You might get Wi-Fi if you're in a home. There's no 4G or 3G, 5G. So people get these things, and then 5 minutes later there is a bomb, or on the way they're going there is a bomb. And they've already, remember, these people had their homes bombed in the north and saw a family member, a sister, a mother die. Then they moved to a shelter, which probably got bombed. They've come down south. There is a panic among people here that they simply now do not know where they're meant to go to.
Yeah, and Netanyahu has said that the war will continue until, quote, we achieve all of our goals. What do you make of that, and what does that mean for Palestinian civilians?
Devastation. The world has to now be aware of the scale of this. We're at 6,000 children killed, more now. There's no doubt some of the children I saw this morning, the severity of their wounds, Isabel, they will not make it through the day. Many children there. So the idea that it continues, a war on children to continue whilst the world watches, I think we have to accept now in a civilized society, those democracies that have a say here, that silence is complicity. And they need to look into the eyes of mothers who've lost the ability to protect their children, of young students and the brilliant brains that I encounter all the time who are utterly fearful. They have to accept that they are allowing the death of these people. As you and I have spoken, there's been another 2 very large bombardments, Isabel. It is probably the most intense day we've seen. Certainly it's the most intense day the South has seen, which is another narrative we've heard, that we are told, governments, will not possibly allow what to happen in the South has happened in the North. Well, it's happening in the South. I can bear witness to that.
Well, that's just why I wanted to bring this up. Now, he mentioned that the water was too salty to drink, right, Care Bear?
mm-hmm.
You hear that? So, note that Elder is reporting the tap water in Khan Yunis is too salty to drink. And because Israel has destroyed the pipelines and denied fuel for pumps, desalinized water is not reaching people. Salt water causes you to urinate out more water than you take in, so over time will kill you from dehydration. This little girl is facing this life-threatening situation in the hospital. Meanwhile, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported heavy Israeli bombardments from air, land, and sea across Gaza, as well as ground operations and fighting. Hamas also fired some rockets at Israel, though apparently ineffectually. The report continues from the afternoon of 2nd December to the afternoon of 3rd December. At least 316 people were killed and at least another 664 injured in Gaza, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. The Israelis summarized ordered 20% of Khan Yunis to go elsewhere, to the places Elder characterized as death traps. Khan Yunis had a population of about 230,000 before the current Israeli Copper bombing campaign, making it roughly as populous as Richmond, Virginia, or Spokane, Washington. A fifth of its population would be roughly 46,000 people who were being herded elsewhere all of a sudden, under threat of death by bombardment. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is dedicated to thinning out the population of Gaza. I mean, I don't know how you can get more genocidal than that. That's pretty blatant, right?
Right.
Some 2.2 million people, apparently leaving none of them anywhere to live, somehow figures into this final solution. Cough, cough, wink, wink. Removing the impurities from the Israeli body politic. Care Bear. Thoughts?
It's yeah, I'm going back to what I was saying earlier, just the rage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like Israelis are doing this to them. And basically, Israelis are implying the fact that, oh, you can't get angry at us. This is for your own good.
No bullshit.
That's what they essentially do.
Right.
You know, and it's like, yeah, you're essentially killing families. Like, they have a right to be pissed off at you. And more importantly, they have a right to resist you.
Well, and if we said anything like we want to thin out the Israeli population, would that not be like
imagine no, here's the thing. If Trump said that,
right.
If Trump said that, oh, I want to thin out, you can fill in the blank of any global South country.
Right.
You know,
Mexico's population, for instance.
Every Democrat would be screaming right now. But, you know, because and I think it was Sabi who said this, or not just her, but other people have said this online, Benjamin Netanyahu literally has everyone in Congress by the balls, including Kamala and Biden.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they have shit. He's literally the bully that they can't talk down to. In terms of, if you continue doing this, no more money for you. Like even Kamala, who I think had a press conference in Dubai this week. I think we were listening to it a couple of nights ago. You know, she can even say that. She was just like, "Oh, we have to move forward and help rebuild after the conflict is over." You can end it right now by being like,
yeah,
keep this up, no more funding.
Right.
You know, and
I don't think they would do very well without that Iron Dome funding, or, you know, I think they still, bro, let me tell you, if they think they are bombardment isn't going to be how they, I've seen them pump seawater into tunnels, right? So fuck those hostages. They don't give a shit. Those hostages are done for, right? B, bombardment is not going to get them the land. They will have to occupy it physically by force. I don't think they can handle a full-on ground invasion of Gaza. I do not think the Israelis are capable of that. They're going to try. From what I've seen, they're not doing well where they're trying. So I think you might see that we need to send troops over there. And I think that might be a possibility if, you know, Congress has its way. Yes.
Right.
So, and if that's the case, I don't see why other countries don't get involved. I don't see why they shouldn't get involved now. So,
Right.
you know, there's plenty of countries that are ready to go to bat for this right now. So, I mean,
Like
pack your
just
butts,
as an
dig your
aside,
shelters, you know, get, you know. So,
I wanted to bring this up because I actually forgot to mention this in the last segment. Like in terms of the Ben Gurion Canal, like who's going to build that shit?
yeah.
Like definitely not Israelis.
I know.
Like-
Elon Musk wants to be a part of the rebuilding of Gaza, so his boring company might be part of this. Who knows? He might be looking
who's
for
to
some
say
money.
that they're not going to have? Who's to say they're not going to have Africans come in?
For ties.
You know, so or even possibly Palestinians. Maybe they could promise them in the hope of them returning home that you build this canal.
We've
like,
talked about the African indentured servitude in Israel. We've talked about
Right.
that being a thing. So, yep. But stay tuned. More to come.